Hey, I'm Jake Patton. I'm going to give you a really quick look into the PsychoPy experiment software. Um, Briefly, hopefully, we'll see how brief I can be, but I'm gonna aim for brief. This is again, we're gonna talk about PsychoPy, the things that you'll need if you want to follow along during this, or if you want to make your own experiment afterwards. You'll need PsychoPy 3. That's the current version. Of course, you can download any of the older versions, but the one I'm going to be showing you is the newest PsychoPy 3. You'll also need Microsoft Excel. That's kind of the engine that drives PsychoPy is Python, but from our perspective, if we're not coding, then the engine that drives PsychoPy is Excel. That's where we'll put out all of our variable names and files, and that you'll need Excel. You don't need any coding experience. You can have some. You can add your own code components to your experiment, but it's not a required skill. And then lastly, you might need a Pavlovia.org license, but that's only if you want to run your studies online. So PsychoPy is free to download, and you can install it on a number of computers. What I do is when I'm using a computer lab situation, if all of the computer labs are on a network, I'll download PsychoPy for all of the computers, and then I'll distribute the program I've made to all of them. If they're not connected, just throw it on a jump drive. In that respect, you don't need Pavlovia if you've got a computer lab, or if you're running experiments just on a couple of your own computers. No Pavlovia license necessary. But if you want to run them online, which if you're watching this video when I'm making it, which is while we're all working at home because of COVID-19, online experiments might be coming in handy. So you will need some sort of Pavlovia license. I say some sort of Pavlovia license because you have two choices. Your first choice is you can pay about 25 cents per person, or there's a site license option as well, and that would give access for the entire university for about $1,800, I think. I say about. The reason I say about is the prices listed on the Pavlovia.org website are in pounds sterling because they're based in the UK. And the last time that I looked at the conversion rate, it was about 25 cents and $1,800. And some change. Well, 25 cents is change. You get what I'm saying. So just briefly, want to give credit to the people that actually developed it. Obviously, I have no connection to it except that I use it in a lot of my experiments. I think it's a really great piece of software. It's as good as ePrime, but you don't have to pay for ePrime, and there's really good documentation online too. PsychoPy has a really active online community. It's a Google group and some other message boards here and there. And people get back to you within a couple hours if you ask a question. And also, tons of questions have already been asked. So there's a lot of answers to be had if you have a question or a problem. So it was developed by Jonathan Pierce. He's at the University of Nottingham. Hence why the prices are in pounds sterling. And then he also asks that you cite this most recent publication, Pierce et al. 2019, if you use PsychoPy in your study. And if you have a copy of my slides, this is the APA style citation for that, so you can copy that and throw that into your manuscript, make it easier on yourself. So we're going to start with if you don't know what the Stroop Effect is, it's really interesting. And it's very interesting, and once you hear it, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not a difficult concept to understand, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Essentially, naming the color that a word is written in is a very easy task, right? So these down here, green, blue, red, orange, very easy. But that task becomes really difficult when the word is when the word itself is a non-congruent color name. So instead of door, house, pick, monkey, I start throwing in color names that aren't written in the same color that they are. Now I've got orange, purple, green, blue, right? So that was okay. Not too bad, but I'm sure that it was a little slower than the other one, and it definitely took a little bit more effort to suppress my desire to say the words that I'm looking at. So that's what we're going to work on. Now, obviously, one of the things that I can't do is, well, in fact, that's actually not true. PsychoPy does let you use microphone input as an input device. It's a little troublesome, right? Because we'd need some sort of speech recognition software to tell us if our participants were answering correctly or not. I don't want to go through that trouble. You might, but I don't. Certainly not for this demonstration. So what I want to do is I want to equate saying the color to pressing a key that's been predetermined as meaning that color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use right for red and left for blue. I'll put those on my arrow keys when we get started. PsychoPy is really good at pulling timing information. That's essentially what it's for. It means, I should have told you this earlier, but it means psychophysics written in Python. So it's a psychophysics toolbox that's written in Python. And the main crux of psychophysics is accurate timing. So what we want to do is compare the times for these key presses to figure out how much of a slowdown there is with this incongruency. So if I have right written, if I have the word red written in red, how much faster am I than if I have the word red written in blue? It's already starting to get confusing for me. So we'll see how I do when I demonstrate this for you. All right. Then at the end, once I've built this, there's some things that don't come up in building this experiment that I want to talk about. And those things are non-key press responses. So like Likert scales, we can get those as well. Or, well, I guess it should be pronounced Likert scale, actually. We'll also look at non-text stimuli. We can present auditory stimuli. We can present pictures. There's a lot of things that we can actually present. And also PsychoPy interfaces with button boxes and certain headsets, certain types of EEG headsets, and EEG sequencing equipment as well. There's also different kinds of experiment loops that I want to show you. That might not mean anything to you yet, and that's fine. We'll talk about what loops are in a minute. And then lastly, I want to talk about uploading your experiment to Pavlovia. Okay, so let's get started. This is PsychoPy, but this is the coder view. This is probably what's going to pop up when you first go through your first run-through of PsychoPy. If you are a coder, if you know Python, this might be where you live. And that is great, but I suspect that if you know Python, you're probably not watching my video. So we'll go and do the typical mortal view, which is going to be the builder view. All right, now this is builder view. It actually looks a lot like coder view, but one of the ways that you know that you're in the right place is that you've got these numbers along the top. This is your timing for your for each routine. We'll talk about what a routine is in a minute. And this is your entire timeline of your experiment down here. This will show each individual routine and the loops and everything. Like I said, don't worry about what any of that is until we get there. So this is where you want to be. What's over here on the right, these are the components, right? So these are like commonly used objects right here. This is insert an audio stimulus. This is going to be a text. This doesn't necessarily need to be a text stimulus. This can be, well, actually that's true for the audio files too. You can have audio instructions if you want. You could just set it to play at any time, and it doesn't have to be a stimulus. That's true for text as well. It can be a stimulus. It can be instructions. The keyboard is often only used for response. And then you can also have images. You can use this to display an image on the screen, or you can use it to create fine timing of anything. So it can be up as a static background. It can be up as something that pops up if you're doing gist research. Here's where you can choose other types of stimulus generation. You've got other responses here. You can add, here's the voice response that I talked about earlier. These are your Likert scales. You can add a mouse response, and you can have a joystick or a gamepad as well. Okay, so what is a routine? Well, a routine is each portion of an experiment. And Builder View functions by looking at individual routines. So you can think about that like instructions. That's one routine. Having a crosshair is a routine, and then seeing your actual stimulus, whether it's the word red or blue, written in either red or blue, that is a routine as well. And then you might have text at the end, and that's another routine. So each individual thing that you want to display is a routine. All right, so the first thing that we want to do, we've got one here. It gives you one called trial. And that's kind of what we're in right now. It's blank. We don't have anything in there. I'm going to save it for the actual trial that we're going to build. What I want to put in first is the instructions. So insert routine, new. And then you want to name your routine. I didn't realize that the recording stopped. So I have an instruction set up. So I have this little black dot now. And I could put it on either side of trial. But I want to put it in the beginning, because the instructions should come before the trial. So there's instructions. And now I've got some stuff in there that I will remove, so we can actually take a look at how to set it up. Okay, so when you set up a new routine, the first thing that's going to happen is you're still going to be in trial. So if I went to insert routine, new, and made instructions, I would still be in trial. So what I have to do is I have to select instructions like that. You can click on these tabs up here, or you can come down here and click on instructions down there. I like to focus on the experiment bar down here at the bottom. And the reason for that is it tells me a little bit more about my experiment. The tabs up here, they open in the order in which you're creating the routines. That's why trial comes before instructions. You can click and drag those and reorder them, but, you know, why do we want to do that if we have it down here in the order that we want? So down here, this is the order of the experiment. Time starts here and goes this way. So if I know what all of my routines are doing, I can get a really good idea of what's happening with my experiment. What are my participants going to be experiencing as they run through my experiment? So I focus down there, and I don't pay so much attention to the tabs up above. You can do whatever works for you, but that is my advice. All right, so in instructions, what we want to do is we want to put in some text, because that's how we're going to instruct our participants. So we're going to click on this T. That means text. And there's a couple things that we see here. We see a start time. We see a stop time. The color of the font itself, the letter height, which would just be the font size, the position, which is where the text is going to start. It's a 0, 0. That corresponds to the very center of your screen. And if you have a long amount of text, it centers it on 0, 0. It doesn't start, you know, at 0 and go down. So it centers it, which is nice. And then we have text, which is what we're actually writing. All right, so first I'm going to give the instructions. what we want to do is we want to say, you will see some words. Nah, it doesn't sound very good. You will see a series of words written, presented in various colors. Whoops, I think that was a comma? No, that was a period. Okay. Your task is to identify the color of the word. Press the right arrow for red. Press the blue arrow for... No, that doesn't make any sense. Press the left arrow for blue. Okay. Now, let's talk about timing really quickly. So, start time 0, that means that these words are going to appear as soon as this routine starts. And this routine is the first routine that we're going to have, so it's going to start as soon as the experiment begins. If I changed my start time, you'd get a blank screen, and then the words would be presented when the start time comes up. So let's say I change the start time to 2 seconds. I'd have a blank screen for 2 seconds, and then my words would appear. The stop duration is going to be how long those words are presented. Since these are instructions, we want to make sure that our participants have time to read them. So we could guess how long it takes. We could leave these words up for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, any amount of time. But what that means is if you have a fast reader, they're not going to be able to go ahead. And if you have a slow reader, they might go away before they're done. So what we actually want to do is we want to set that to nothing. Not 0, but nothing. We want to leave it blank. Now, as that stands, what that means is it's going to start at 0. It's going to start when the routine begins. And then it's going to go on indefinitely until the end of the universe, right? Until the heat death of the universe. Unless you add something in that stops the routine. But that's exactly what we're going to do. So we want to say press space to continue. All right, now we're good. We're going to click OK on that. Now you can see here, this is showing you how long your unit, your component is running, right? So if this bar, this blue line, if this line goes all the way to the end of the screen here, that means it's going on forever. If it stops somewhere, that means you set it up to stop. We want to add in a key press. There we go. And so this is going to start at 0 and stop indefinitely. But it is going to force the end of the routine right here. So that's good. That means that right now, it means that when Y, N, the left arrow, the right arrow, or the space bar are pressed, then our instruction routine is over. That's pretty good, but I don't want somebody to accidentally hit any of those other keys. I want them to only be able to hit the space bar to end the routine right now. So I'm going to put in space. You could do other things. You can do anything in here, right? So you could say return. Make sure you put it in single quotes. You could put in Q. You could put in W. Anything like that. You could put in 9. And these would work, right? So right now, what we actually want is just space. So that's the only thing that can be used on the keyboard. Anything else that gets pressed, nothing happens. Okay, so what's going to happen is the keyboard component is going to activate at 0 seconds. It's going to activate as soon as the routine begins. And it's not going to stop on its own. It's only going to stop when our participant hits space. Now, one thing, just a quick tip, is when we have undergrad participants who are doing this for credit, maybe they don't read the instructions all the time. So what I like to do is I like to add in about 3 seconds here before the keyboard component starts. That means that they can't force the end of the routine for 3 seconds. They have to sit there with the instructions up for 3 seconds, and then they can end it. I feel like 3 seconds is about, enough time for a fast reader to read and then actually understand what they're doing and move on. And then if you have a slow reader, they can let it stay up for any amount of time. But I don't want somebody to just see the phrase at the bottom, press space to continue, and hit space and not read anything else. So I want to leave this up. Okay, now when I'm in debug mode, just for me, I'll take that off and put a 0 in. That way I can advance without watching my own instructions for 3 seconds. Okay, so we're going to click OK, and now we have both a text component and a keyboard component. And actually, this is all we need for instructions right now. That's good. The next thing I want to put in is I want to put in a practice. I want my participants to practice this before they're asked to do it for, a grade. So we're going to go to New, and I'm going to call this Practice Blue. Hit Enter. And now I've got this dot again. Where do I want this to go? Well, I want it to go between instructions and trial. So I'm going to click right there. Now remember, we're still in instructions. So I want to click on Practice Blue, and here we are. Let's add in some text. This is going to say, press the left arrow when you see a word in blue. All right, now here is the thing about this. We want this to be there indefinitely. So we're going to remove the duration. It's going to stay forever until this trial's over. But we actually might want to move the position. So we don't want this to be right in the center of the screen. We want this to kind of be like a header up near the top of the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the Y to maybe 0.3. Well, not 0.32. 0.3. And we'll see what that looks like. It might not be high enough, and we'll have to change it, but we'll figure it out. Okay, so we're going to click OK. So now we've got that text component, but here is what we want. We want another text component, and all it's going to say is word. We want to change the color to blue. And if you saw that little pop-up menu, it says you can put in numerical values to get, multiple colors. You can get any color from the display if you put in the numerical values. You can also right-click to bring up this color picker, which opened on my other screen. Let me bring it over for you. Yeah, here you go. So you get this standard color picker here. So we could, instead of typing in blue, I could select this color of blue. We'll go with that. Okay, so now instead of blue, I've got this color here. So that's great. But you could just type in blue. All right, I want to make my letters a little bit larger than the regular text for these test words. So I'm going to go with 0.2. We'll see what that looks like. I'm going to move the position down just slightly to offset it from our other text. So I'm going to go to -0.2. That should be fine. There we go. Arial's fine. And now here's the other thing. I don't want this word to appear right away. I want our participants to read the text, again, that says, like, press the left arrow if you see a blue word. And I want them to process that and wait for a blue word, and then I want the blue word to appear. So let's give them 2 seconds. The blue word will show up in 2 seconds. And I want it to stay there indefinitely. All right. Now the last thing we need is a keyboard component. We want it to start at 0. Well, actually, that's not true. We don't want them to continue until they see the blue word. So we want it to start at 2 seconds as well. And this time, we don't want to leave space. We want to leave left. Now remember, you're not limited to the keys that are on that when it comes up. You're not limited to Y, N, left, right, and space. It just happens that I'm using space, left, and right for this experiment, but you can use all of the keys on a standard keyboard. Some of them have funny names, and you'll have to look those up, but they're all available to you to use for your experiments. Okay, so we do want it to force the end of the routine. We want left to be the only thing possible, and we want to click OK. All right, so there's our practice for blue. I've got a similar practice for red that I've already built, just like a cooking show. I've got some things in the oven already. So we'll go to practice red. In our trial, this is kind of where the different stuff comes in. So we're going to set up the text box, and our words are going to be, well, actually, you know what? I want to set up a crosshair first. I always like to have a focus point for my participants to sit on before the stimulus appears. So I'm going to go to Insert Routine, New. We're going to call it Crosshair. We're going to put it right before the trial. And we're going to go to Text. All it needs is a plus sign. That's not a plus sign. All it needs is a plus sign. We'll make it just a little bit bigger than usual. It can be centered. It's only going to last a second. In fact, that might seem a little long. It'll last half a second. Okay, and there's our crosshair. Now we're going to go to trial. You might be wondering, if we want a crosshair before every item, do we need to make 30 crosshairs? No, not at all. We only need to make one. And here's where we're going to set up every item as well. Every item is set up just in this one routine. All 30 of them, or however many we want to have, are set up right here in this routine. So this is what makes PsychoPy great and quick to work with. This is one of the reasons I like it. If I'm just left to my own devices, not recording, I can make an experiment in about 15-30 minutes, if it's not a very difficult one. If it's something that requires skills that I haven't practiced in a while, or coding components, it could take maybe an hour, maybe 2, but that's really good, right? I mean, if you've been slaving over some other experiment software for days or weeks, trying to get an experiment running, this is definitely a breath of fresh air. It's really, I'm amazed at how quickly I can set up experiments and get them running. Makes data collection a snap. So, all right, so what do we want to do? We're going to go to trial. We're going to get a text box here, or not a text box, but a text component. This time we do want the words to start at 0, and we want their duration to be nothing. They're going to stay up the entire time. Here, okay, color. This is interesting, right? Because we want it to be either red or blue, but it can't be both. We can't type in both. So here's what we do. We're going to set up a variable. So we specify a variable in PsychoPy with a $sign. That's it. Well, that's not it actually, but what you're going to do is you're going to type in $, and let's just call it color. So we have a variable named color. Now here's another thing. This is important, but you're definitely going to forget it when you set up your first experiment. I did, for sure. You want to click on constant, and you want to change it to set every repeat. If you don't do that, you're going to get an error message, and I guarantee you it's going to happen. It happens to me. I mean, I've been using this for years, and occasionally I'll still forget to change it to set every repeat. So when that happens, remember this, what I'm telling you right now, check it. Make sure it's set to set every repeat, and that's probably what your problem is. You're not going to forget the $sign. Most people don't seem to remember, variable needs $sign. But that little checkbox, that's the thing that gets forgotten. Okay. So we want to change our letter height. We want to make it a little bit bigger. We want to leave it right in the middle. But now we want it to either say red or blue. So once again, this is another variable. So we're going to type in $word. And again, change it to set every repeat. Okay. So this should be good. We have color, we have word. This looks good. Okay, now we want to also set up a keyboard component. We want it to start at 0. We want there to be no duration. We want to leave left and right this time because we want to have both options available to them, because we want to see when they screw up, right? We want to know when they did well, and we want to know when they did poorly. Now, the keys aren't going to change. If you did want to change the keys, you could. You could put in $key or whatever you wanted to call it, and you could change this little drop-down menu so that you could either only allow left or right. And you could look at response time that way. You wouldn't allow them to have any incorrect responses because you'd change which key is allowed. I don't want to do that. Like I said, I want to see when they get it wrong. But what I can do is I can tell PsychoPy what the correct key is. So I'm going to click on Store Correct, and I'm going to tell it that the correct answer is a variable, and we're going to call that correct. Okay, so we have 3 variables: color, word, and correct. All right. So we want to click OK, and this is pretty much it. We are almost done with building our experiment in PsychoPy. The last thing we want to do is we want to add another routine. Insert routine, new, and I want to call this end text. We get our little dot. We want to put it after trial. Oh, there. Crosshair just turned green. Why did Crosshair turn green? Well, because it's the only one of our routines that has a defined endpoint. So if you're setting up something that needs really well-defined times, you're looking for greens. I like to leave the things to infinity a lot because I'm looking for behavioral responses. So I want to get the response time. I don't want to have anything shut off before someone could respond. So most of mine are red. But if you have a reason that you need really precise timing, you're looking for green down here in the experiment bar. Okay, so let's go to our exit text. I'm going to click on the text box. We are going to change the duration to 5 seconds. And I'm going to say, that's it. Thank you. And everything else looks good. We'll click OK. All right, our experiment is almost done. We want to talk about a loop, though. So what do we have? We have trial, which is where all of our words are coming from. Every word is going to be presented in trial. And we want the crosshair to appear before it. So what we want to do is we want to loop that. We want it to go through each of these and not loop any routine except for crosshair and trial. And then it comes out of the loop once we've gone through enough times, and then we go to end text. So you've probably seen this button over here called Insert Loop. Now we have another dot, and we want to click on this side of trial and this side of crosshair. Anything that's within the two dots is going to be taken into the loop. So if I accidentally clicked over here and put practice red inside, we would do practice red, then there would be a crosshair, then one item. Then we'd do practice red, then a crosshair, then one item. We don't want to do that. So we want to put it on the front side of crosshair, and now we get a new window. Window is for loop properties. So we want our loop to be random, but you don't have to. If you have a reason that you want to go through it sequentially, you can set it up to go through sequentially. We're going to talk about Excel in a second, but essentially you'd put your variables into Excel, and if you wanted it to run sequentially, you just put them into Excel sequentially running down, and it would go through in that order. If you do random, it doesn't matter what order you put them in, it's going to be random. You've also got the option for staircase procedures and interleaved staircases. A single staircase is actually pretty easy to wrap your mind around. The interleaved staircase is a little bit more difficult. It's not as easy as just clicking on interleaved staircase. That's one that requires a little bit of visiting some message boards and playing around with some of the demos that PsychoPy gives you. I guess I should point that out really quickly. There's demos up here in this little drop-down menu. So you can click on that, look at Gabor patches, you can look at interleaved staircase and all that, all those different kinds of things, and then see how they're built, and then also run yourself through them. And if any of them match what you want to do, you can tweak it slightly and run your experiment that way. But I like to use them as learning tools. Okay, so, sorry, my voice is starting to, I've talked too long, which means I need to get cracking on this. You're probably getting bored. All right, so, sorry. We want to leave it as random. And here's your number of repetitions. Let's just go through it once. Well, let's go through it twice. I just won't put in very many trials. So we're going to run through the things that I have twice, randomly. We don't need to put in selected rows. We don't need a random seed. Selected rows would be if you have a file, like a large file that you use for multiple experiments, you can tell it only to run certain rows. But in this case, I'm going to set it up just to use all the rows. A random seed you don't need if you just want to start from a certain place and go randomly from there. You can specify that. What we do need to specify is a conditions file, and we don't have one of those yet. So we're just going to click OK and leave it blank. And now you can see right here we have this little loop. So now what's going to happen is our participants start, they go through this, they go here, and then they enter the loop. And they go through here twice, and then they're shot out into end text, which has turned green because it has a defined endpoint. All right, so to set up our conditions file, we need to start Excel. What we want to do is fill in the top row with the names of our variables. So we had color, word, and correct. Now these are going to be paired. So row 2, everything in row 2 is going to go together. That means that if I put in the color is red and the word is red, and correct is going to be right. So it's not going to be set up so that I can say blue blue, left. This isn't going to randomize. We have it set to randomize, but it's not going to randomize the colors separately of the words. It's going to randomize the pairs, and the pairs are paired up by row. So what we've got is a pair of red, red, and blue, blue. So to get a full factorial design, what we need is we need to put in red, blue, blue, red. All right, so we're answering for the actual color of the word. So this one is going to be right, and this correct answer is going to be left. And that's it. We're going to run through these twice. And, oh, you know what? We can actually, let's add in something else. Red, blue, red, blue. Word, word. Cat, cat. Okay, so it's going to be right, left, right, left. Okay, great. So now we've got a variety of colors. Well, we've got red and blue, and we've got combinations. We've got red paired with the word red. We've got blue paired with the word red, blue with the word blue, and red with the word blue. We've also got red and blue for the word word, and we've got red and blue for the word cat. And then we have correct answers for all of those as well. Now, this is all we need to do. This is all ready to go. What we need to do is go to File and Save As, and we need to specify where we're going to save this. One thing that PsychoPy does is all you have to specify is local file names, because it's going to pull it from whatever file it itself is in. So what that means is, let's just do something on my desktop. We'll jump in here, and we want to save this as conditions. All right. So now this is our conditions file. If you had, like, let's say you had audio files. Let's say you wanted to pull in somebody saying the word bacon, and you'd save that as bacon.wave. You'd put in bacon.wave. Let's say you had hamburger.wave. You could put that in too. Maybe you also have pictures. You could have a picture of cheese.jpg or peppercorn.png. So you can put these in and specify those, and PsychoPy will know to pull those from that folder that you've saved it in. So the conditions file needs to go in the working folder. Bacon.wave, cheese.jpg, those all need to go in the working folder. And then we need to save our PsychoPy program into the working folder. And if it's all in the working folder, it's good. This is important because this is the same way that you upload these if you want to put them on pavlovia.org. So what it's going to do is it's going to take your working folder and turn that into a code directory. The entire folder gets essentially zipped together and put into the cloud. Every file in that directory is downloaded onto your participant's computer when they start completing the experiment. So what that means is the timing is good. It's not pulling a file from across the internet and then displaying it to them. The file's already been downloaded. It's displayed, and then they can answer whatever question you pose to them, and the timing is good. The relative timing between on their screen is still intact. Okay, now let's get rid of this nonsense. We've saved this as conditions, so we can get rid of that now. Yeah, we'll save my changes. Okay. So let's, now that we've created a folder, we want to save our project. We put that on my desktop. We'll go to How to PsychoPy. We're going to call this Stroop. All right, and now one more thing to do. We want to come down to our trials loop, and we actually want to select the conditions file now. So we're going to go to Browse. It knows where we're saved. It knows that we're in How to PsychoPy. We just find our conditions file, open it, and then things change, right? So it populates this with conditions.xlsx, and it says that we have 8 conditions with 3 parameters. And our parameters are color, word, and correct. This is exactly what we put in as our variables in the rest of the experiment. So we're going to click OK, and we're going to save that one more time. And now we're going to click on this little running guy here. And that's going to load this window called Experiment Runner. And then it's going to put our stroop.psyexp over here. We're going to click on Run, and we're going to say Run. Okay, so this is your participant ID box, essentially. You can type in, so I could put in Jake 99999, so I know that it's a test. Or so it shows up at the bottom of my list, ZZZ999, and we can click OK, or hit enter, rather. Okay, well, that's a little too big. So one thing that we need to do is make our words a little bit smaller. That's unfortunate. So we're going to hit the space bar. And that'll advance us. Press left when you see word. Oh, there's the word. Press left. Press right arrow when I see a word in red. And I see it, so I'm going to push the right, and then right, left, 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 right. Left, right, left, left. And then that's it. So we've run through both of our repetitions twice. And so let me jump back to my other view. Okay, so that was it. I got a couple warning error messages here at the end. And one of them is, are you running other processes on your computer? Things might have got a little bit laggy on that one. And yes, I'm running my recording software. So I think, and I haven't restarted my computer for a while. So, whoops. Anyway, that I think is what the problem is here. Things are a little laggy, needs to be restarted. That's okay for these purposes. So let's take a look at what the output looks like. We'll go into How to PsychoPy. We will go into our data. This is something we didn't add. PsychoPy adds this for us, a data folder. And here we've got ZZZ999 and 734. Let's look at that one. That should be the most recent. These are timing information for our other routines. So it gives us when the spacebar was hit in the instructions. It gives us when the left and right keys were hit for our practice. And then this is what we're actually looking for. This is when the crosshair began. And then this is when the next text began. Then what we've got here is when it was stopped. None of it was stopped. Here's the response I gave. So you could, if you forgot to put in the correct answer, you could figure out the correct answer just by writing a little bit of Excel code. If this matches this, then, 1, else 0. But we do have this here. This right here means correct. So this is if it was correct or not. A 1 is correct, a 0 is not. I did good. Congratulations, me. But here are my times. And this is probably where we're going to see that I didn't do as well. So we can sort these out. And remember, we have our response here, but we also have over to the left, we have what the actual stimulus was as well. So if we go over here, here's what the stimulus was at that time. So we've got red, red or blue, whatever the word was, and what the correct answer was. So I can sort those. All right, so there are the results from this quick little run through. Took a lot more time with the incongruent colors and color names. It was a lot longer than either congruent colors or words that were not color words at all. So that's that's usually what we see with the Stroop Effect. If you're not familiar, these are not unusual results. Okay, so that was the Stroop Effect. We set up a Stroop experiment in, I don't know how long that took. It's taken me a little while. It's taken me a little while, but a lot of that is the recording and getting it set up and stuff like that. I'm not sure how long the video is actually going to be cut down to be, but it should be about, we've set it up in maybe 15 minutes or closer to 20. So you can set up a Stroop Effect that quickly. You could add in more colors. You could add green and yellow into the mix and more words as well. And it wouldn't really significantly bump up the time. So that is the basics of experiment creation. So now the only thing that's left to do is take a look at some of the extras. Okay, so some of the other things that you can do, like I said, there's other input methods. So you've got this one here. This is a drawing tool. I've actually not used this. This is new to my... I've not had a chance to play around with that. The joystick and the gamepad, pretty self-explanatory. You can map X and Y dimensions, so you can get kind of a graded input with a joystick rather than just a press of a keyboard. The mouse is really interesting. So if you do the mouse, you get not only click data and the timing of the click data, but you also get the trajectory of the mouse. And if you follow a lot of the dynamics literature, mouse trajectory is actually an interesting tool in looking at our decision making between two choices. So if we start in the middle and we look at the actual trajectory getting towards those choices, that can indicate something about those two choices. You can also do a Likert Scale here, and you've got a lot of options on how to set those up. So you can change your values. I like to do 1 to 10 a lot. You can add labels to those. You can jump into the advanced, and you can make this force the end of the routine when it's clicked. You can have it so that people they click, and then they click on the scale, and then they have to accept their answer in a additional button. Or if you don't have that and you turn it on to the single click setting, then you click right on the Likert Scale and the trial's over and you move to a next one. There's other settings in there as well, but that's a little bit beyond what we're here for. You've got button boxes as well. And some other I/O things as well. So we can do serial ports and here we go. Code components. So this is where you can put in your own code. If you know Python, or if you found something in one of the message boards that you'd like to put in, this is how you add that. All right. So then other stimuli. We kind of talked about this already, but you can put in pictures, and all you do is here where it says image, bacon.jpg. Right, that's your image, and then you can select the size of it and the position and go from there. So we'll add my bacon picture in. You can add in Gabor patches and audio stimuli. That's what I'm looking for, is audio stimuli. So what's cool about audio stimuli is you can choose a note. You can type in a frequency. So this A is going to start at a 440 A, but you can put in a G. And then, like I said, you can add in frequency. So I can add in 12,000 hertz, or 1,200 hertz rather, sorry. And you can also change the amplitude of that as well. Or you can add in something like scream.wave. And then your scream is going to play when you start the experiment. Okay. You can also do loops within loops. So here, instead of a conditions file, maybe you would put in variable loop 2, holding something in your experiment constant for a time, but not for the entire time, if that makes sense. Oh, perfect. Okay, this is a good example. You can change the background color of your experiment. So let's say that you want to keep the background as a certain color. Or maybe you want to add in a picture stimuli and have people do the Stroop task in the gray background that we had, and then on a picture stimulus. So in one of your run-throughs, you have it so that, color and word and the correct answer, those are all still variables, and those are all still in the conditions file, and that's great. But inside of that, while that's happening, you want to have the gray background. So you have one set of all these running with a gray background, you have another set running with a picture background. Well, you could set it up so that you have gray background and a loop here, and then picture background and a loop here. But what if you want that to be randomized as well? What if you want some people to get the gray background first and others to get the picture background first? You could set up 2 different experiments, and you could then randomize which experiment they got, but that's too much work, especially if you're putting it on the internet and you have no control over how they're getting to it. So what you can do is you can have it randomized inside how the color and word are presented, but then you have an overarching randomization that's randomizing the background, and that is how you would use nested loops. One last thing is getting user input. So something that PsychoPy is not good at is getting answers from users. And by answers, I mean like having them type out their age, their gender, or just any sort of message back to the experimenter. There's nothing that really gives you that. Even in this newest version that I downloaded and I've played with a little bit, there still isn't anything that allows them to give you direct feedback. Not a preset, anyway. What you can do is you can play around with the text box. So what you'd have is text input, and it would set up every frame is different, so that what's in here is pulling from what's been typed into the keyboard component. So you add a keyboard component, and then you have information being typed into the keyboard component, and every frame, the text box is pulling from what's been typed into that keyboard component. It sounds complicated, and if you had to program it from scratch, it probably would be complicated. But on the PsychoPy message boards, you can find dozens of different methods of coding this. I've also got methods of coding this, so if that's something that you're looking to do, I can send you my own code. I can send you an experiment. You can then just adapt the code. But that would be one of those things that you do in the coding component right here. Okay, so now the very last thing that we want to talk about is putting this online. So these buttons right here are all internet buttons. They put the thing, it's fully integrated into Pavlovia. So what you do is you want to first log in. So you log into your Pavlovia account. I'm actually logged in already. So there's me. Once you're logged in, you can then sync your experiment. So you want to click on this, and then you will, well, what it's doing right now is saving. Yeah, there we go. So what it was doing, you couldn't see. It saved, like I talked about earlier, it took my entire working directory, that How to PsychoPy folder, and turned it into an HTML folder, which it's then going to upload to pavlovia.org. So what we can do here is, yeah, okay, so this is a new experiment, so it's not finding anything that's been created, so we can create a project. So we'll click OK, and we can name this How to PsychoPy Stroop. The owner will be me. The local folder that it's in is How to PsychoPy. Here's the HTML folder that was created by that process. When I clicked on it, it zipped all this up into one HTML folder, but I'll just tell it that my parent folder is this How to PsychoPy folder, which it's not selecting. There we go. All right, and then this looks good. Create project on Pavlovia. Okay, so I searched for How to PsychoPy Stroop, and here is my How to PsychoPy Stroop folder on Pavlovia. Essentially, if I was a participant, I could click right here to launch the experiment. It would download onto my computer, and I could take it. But this is the one that I just made. Anyway, if you need help, oh, you can see here it says inactive. So I'd need to log in, make that active, and then I could have people take it. I don't have any credits in my account, so I can't take it and show you how that works. But anyway, it's just that easy to get your experiment from your computer onto the internet for your participants to take from anywhere in the world. So it's a fantastic system. I dig it. I mean, the fact that I can create a working experiment in about 15 minutes, put in an extra 5 to get it online, and have my participants take it, the same day is great. This is run a little bit long, but of course I'm available by email to answer any questions about PsychoPy or Pavlovia. Once again, just to drive the point home, the site license for the entire university, for all of ASU, is $1,800, roughly. Again, that's translated from pound sterling. But for the entire university is under $2,000. That seems reasonable, I'd say. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you learned something. And happy coding.